You ready? Yeah, you and me both. Right. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, I'll do a clap just because I think it's
Just because
professional.
you enjoy it.
1, 2, 3. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the Engage podcast. Peter, it's great to be with you.
It's good to see you again too, James.
Now, let us start by commenting on everything that is different. I'm not different. You're not different. What you're wearing is back to what I come to expect on this podcast.
Whereas what you're wearing, your standards have slipped, James.
No, I know. Although this is, I hope you noticed, an American Office, the TV show
I did
jumper,
notice.
bought in New York itself from the NBC shop. So, I mean, this is as smart as a suit in the
It is.
contemporary world. I think we should explain to everyone that currently CARE's head office, 53 Romney Street, is undergoing major renovation work, and we praise God for the amazing generosity of many, many people that have facilitated us making some real improvements to our office, including transforming the basement so that we will have a flexible space, including space to film this very podcast.
Indeed, yeah. We're going to have a bit of a studio downstairs, aren't we? Which is very exciting.
That is the hope. I mean, I think studio is a very grand term for what it will actually be.
Probably.
But it's fun to call it that, isn't it? Yes. Yes. We can still dream.
We can sound
and
professional.
If any major donor is watching this and wants to give a further 100,000 to facilitate the creation of an actual studio downstairs, you would have mine and Peter's everlasting gratitude. So where are we? Well, I understand why you're asking that. We are actually in a church that CARE has partnered with a number of times over the last couple of years. Also, the church where our digital producer is a member.
Indeed.
So this is a real joy. So
Yeah.
Isaac, who you've heard many, many times, or at least I want you to hear more in the podcast, he actually goes to this church. So we're in Christchurch, Haywards Heath. Now, Peter, you told me in the car when we were driving down through the wind and through the rain that you'd never been to Haywards Heath. So tell me about your first impressions of this historic town.
I feel like you've set me up there because you told me what to expect in the car. Where
I did.
How would I put this diplomatically?
Well, don't put it diplomatically.
Well, I think the words I used were it's not exactly a beauty spot.
No, that's right. But we're very, very grateful to be here. And
Absolutely.
We're in this slightly new setup where we've got these incredibly cavernous chairs, aren't
Yeah.
they? These are very easy just to sink back into, aren't they?
No, absolutely. Perhaps we should invest in some of these as part of the office renovation as well.
I love that. And also, I mean, look at these fancy contraptions that are holding our microphones. I mean, it's incredible. I'm having to resist the urge to play with it constantly.
Do you feel like we're a proper podcast now with these mics coming down?
I feel like 2026 has started, and finally the Engage podcast, almost by accident and thanks to a building renovation, has now become more professional. If only we exhibited, or rather, if only I exhibited the same levels of professionalism. However, it is just so good to be back podcasting. And we worked out this so that we could continue to podcast even though the building was closed. And that's because we love doing it. And we are so grateful for all of you who are listening, who are responding, who are engaging. And we continue to be, I mean, I'm personally sometimes just overwhelmed by the variety of people who found these podcasts helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's such an encouragement to know that our ramblings are actually useful.
No, I know.
And yeah, as you said, we really enjoy putting some of the world events which are going on within the framework of a biblical worldview and trying to apply the Bible to help us understand what's going on around us.
And the other thing I'm just going to say at the top, and then we'll get into it, is we've already been in meetings this year about a very exciting thing that we hope to do later in 2026. Full details will be announced when they're ready, but we are hoping to do a live recording of the Engage podcast. Now, this is your opportunity to come and meet us in the flesh. And if that isn't exciting enough, and I can understand why it might not be, we are hoping to have some special guests join us, but we don't want anything to distract from the Engage podcast and a chance to come and ask questions and a chance to dialogue with us. And we would love for you to come and be a part of that. So keep your eyes peeled. Over 2026, we will do a live podcast recording of the Engage podcast, and we would love you to come along. Right, I'm going to do that pitch again at the end. That's the kind of guy I am. Shall we get into it?
Let's go for it.
All right. So one big story dominating the news.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife's a newsreader, as you know, and she told me, and I said to her yesterday, you're going to have a busy day this morning, and she did, because it's all about DJT.
Indeed.
Donald John. Is it John?
I don't actually know what it is.
I think it's John. We'll say it's John. I mean, he doesn't care what he says. He says anything. So, I mean, if it wants to be John today, it can be John today. Donald John Trump. Maybe that's something else he's trying to steal.
You're quite correct.
I knew I'd get it right.
Checked.
So let's sketch this out. So this is all about Greenland, okay? Let's focus on the Greenland. It's called the Greenland crisis, okay? That's now got a name. So you know, like something has been elevated when it's now got its own name. So you go on Wikipedia, you type in Greenland, you are very quickly redirected to the Greenland crisis, and it refers to the fact that the President of the United States, he has now backed off a little bit, but in the early part of this year, he was threatening to use military force to annex another country, a territory that is part of another country. So it's not quite as simple as, he's going to invade Canada, though he has basically threatened that, 51st state and all that nonsense. But it's quite something when the leader of the so-called free world is threatening to colonize a territory that is self-governing to a large degree, but is also part of the Kingdom of Denmark.
Completely. And again, just in terms of context setting, for anyone who doesn't know, Denmark is a member of the United Nations. So not a member of the United Nations, a member of NATO, sorry. They're also a member of the United Nations.
Yes.
A member of NATO, which means that any attempt to effectively attack another territory which belongs to another NATO state would mean that all the other NATO states are obliged to come to its aid.
Yes.
Now, that clause has only ever been invoked one time. Do you know when that was?
This was when NATO had to invoke the clause. Was it during the Cold War?
No.
Was it during the attack on Iraq? 9/11.
It's 9/11.
Yeah, it was 9/11, wasn't it?
So the only country who has ever invoked this was America.
Yes, and Denmark went to the raid.
Denmark, amongst the other NATO countries, came to its aid. And Denmark, after America, suffered the highest percentage of casualties in the war on terror. So the gall of President Trump threatening Greenland in this way, there are plenty of ironies which abound in it.
I wonder if it's just helpful briefly to sketch in exactly how it is that Denmark has responsibility for Greenland, because you may be listening to this and you may be thinking, we're obviously, even from this early tone, going to go on and say some fairly critical things of Donald Trump. At least I certainly am. And yet you could say, well, hold on a minute. Denmark, how did they end up with it? So I've just sketched down a few notes here.
It's like with Arrested History.
I know. Oh, well, our sister podcast is doing very well at the moment. I don't know if you know. Tremendous series on Iran going on at the moment. Very relevant. Anyway, so what we need to understand here is that while Greenland is part of the continent of North America, it's always been, at least for most of time, politically associated with the European Kingdom of Norway from 986 AD. I still use AD, I don't know about you. AD until the early 15th century. And then from the 18th century, it began to be more associated with Denmark. And it was in 1814 when Denmark and Norway separated. They used to be one country. And Greenland was transferred to the Crown of Denmark. Then if you fast forward some time, you go to World War II, because this is key. This is part of Trump's slightly rambling, bizarre rationale for all this. 1940 rather, Nazi Germany invades Denmark and Norway, and therefore America enters into an agreement with the Danish government in exile that they will look after Greenland in the meantime to stop it falling ultimately into Nazi hands. Now, obviously, when the war ended, then it was transferred back to the Danish government. But while America had responsibility for it, they built airfields, they built military bases, they established a real foothold in that territory. And the treaty that they eventually came to, it was in 1951, a defense agreement that allowed them to maintain a defensive position on the island because of its strategic location. And they've actually made an offer to buy it in 1946 for $100 million gold, or $100 million in gold, which is extraordinary. They'd made previous attempts to buy it as well. This is not a new thing. And then the final thing to say is in terms of how Greenland works. So in 1953, there was a constitution, ended Greenland's status as a colony. 1979, there was another referendum. This time, home rule was granted. So Greenland has its own political parties, some of whom are agitating for full independence. And then in 2008, you had a self-government referendum and more powers were transferred. But crucially, responsibility for the defense of Greenland is a reserved power for Denmark. So it's pretty similar to the United Kingdom in terms of the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, the Northern Ireland Assembly. They have delegated powers and responsibilities, but the Westminster Parliament has reserved ones. And the other big thing to understand with Greenland is its location what's happening with the melting of the ice cap, new shipping routes are now opening up because there's more sea for boats to travel in.
Yeah.
And the big concern, this is again as part of Trump's justification, is that Russia and China, but particularly Russia. I mean, some argue that China's not actually massively a threat here because they're 1,000 miles away, but they are using these northern sea routes to try to get their goods and grow their economies. But there's also a concern that they could be sending their submarines and their spying equipment.
Yeah.
And this brings it very, very close to the territorial home of the United States because Greenland is much closer to the US in terms of geography. So that, I hope, just gives you a bit of an explainer as to why we've got to where we've got to.
Yeah.
And Trump's big line has been national security. But I also quite like some of the media stuff around how he's coming across like a mafia don. Like, he's a real estate guy. He just wants a bit of real estate.
Well, yeah, indeed. All I want is a bit of ice, or whatever he said. The other bit, which is probably just also worth adding in, because it sort of links Greenland with what happened in Venezuela a few weeks ago as well, is there's... which feels like old news now, doesn't it?
I know.
But in Greenland, there's been all this talk about potentially trillions of dollars worth of minerals which are buried beneath the ice.
Yeah.
So it's estimated that 30% of the world's undiscovered gas and 13% of the world's undiscovered oil is in the Arctic. Now, of course, part of the equation in what happened in Venezuela is America getting kind of premier access to Venezuela's oil.
Yeah.
So I suspect that is probably also part of the equation, although it's also worth saying that President Trump has rejected that association.
And of course, part of the difficulty with President Trump is you never know when he's speaking the truth or not.
Yeah.
And when I say that, what I mean is he's perfectly capable of saying true things. I actually think some of the comments he made around the energy strategy that we're pursuing here in the United Kingdom, I don't think they're that far off the mark. I think he's got a point. However, when he starts confusing Greenland and Iceland, as he did numerous times in his very long, rambling speech at Davos yesterday in terms of time of recording, but also when he starts using the World War II line, as if that's a definitive, it basically already belongs to us, we just sort of leased it back to you.
Well, yeah,
what
absolutely.
are you talking about?
Let's just kind of look at the language he used on that. So he said, "We gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that?"
Yeah.
It never belongs to America in the first place.
No.
Anyway, it's a variety of other kind of pretty out there claims he made. So he suggested that America was paying for around 100% of NATO's defence, when currently that is just above 60%.
Yeah.
He suggested that America's got nothing back from NATO when, as we've already said, NATO countries came to the US's aid. Back in the early 2000s. One of my favourite ones was his claim that he had not been able to find any wind farms in China. And there's a brilliant line on the BBC Verify article. China has one of the largest wind farms in the world at Gansu, which can be seen from space.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think like a number of others, I sort of wish maybe that's the best place for Donald Trump. Space. Maybe he should go up to the International Space Station and he can have his sort of big colonization plans there. Let's just step back a moment here. I think what we're witnessing and what we're living through is a fundamental change to everything that we've known growing up. The rules-based international order, some commentators are talking about this, is now coming to an end because as long as I can remember, America always worked in lockstep with European allies on different world situations, whether it was the Middle East, whether it was Syria, whether it was what was going on in Libya and in Egypt. And there were times where there were disagreements, but you always got the sense that they were pulling in the same direction. But this new America First policy, this is it being lived out now because Trump is very critical of Europe, suddenly very critical of Keir Starmer when a year ago he absolutely did say that he thought the deal to give up the Chagos Islands was fine. Now he's completely U-turned on that. And I think the idea that suddenly we're used to America and the UK and other NATO allies dealing with Iran or dealing with North Korea or responding to Russian invasion of Ukraine. The idea that for the last week we've actually witnessed the European Union and America in conflict with each other is a massive disruption in what we've been used to, and I don't think that's going to stop because Donald Trump is only at the beginning of his second administration.
Well, there was a fascinating interview a couple of weeks ago when President Maduro was captured, because he was asked, "Well, aren't you sort of are you concerned about violating international law? Is there anything which is going to put a limit on what you do?" And he said, "There is one thing: my own morality." My own mind. It's the only thing that can stop me.
Yes.
I don't need international law. And I thought, gosh, that is fascinating, isn't it?
And terrifying as well.
It is absolutely terrifying.
Because this is the language of a dictator.
Yeah.
And isn't it ironic? I mean, President Putin must be loving this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other strange decision, I mean, it's clearer and clearer to me that President Trump is trying to set up a parallel organization to NATO with his Board of Peace.
Yeah.
And who should he invite to sit on it? But President Putin, the guy who unilaterally annexed Crimea for strategic defense reasons, and has done the same thing in Ukraine, where he's launched an illegal war to try to expand his empire, but of course justified under strategic defense reasons. That's exactly the same kind of justification Trump was using. Now, we should say Trump has backed off from force, and that he said at Davos in his speech that he did not want to use force and he would not use force. But it shows you where we're at, that we should be rejoicing in the fact that the President of America we're rejoicing in him saying, "Oh, I'm not going to send in the 101st Airborne Division to annex Greenland. I'm not going to do it." And we're thinking, "Oh, thank goodness," because we were taking it seriously. Because there's no knowing what he's going to do. And what I was sort of reflecting on with President Trump and all of this is, you're seeing what happens when a man and his ego are largely unchecked.
Yeah.
We've been going through the book of James in church, and James 4, which talks about evil desires. And then there's a really, really frightening bit that when you first read it, you kind of think, "Oh, come on, James, like turn it down a little bit. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight." You think, well, there's quite a difference between killing and quarreling and fighting. And I think what James is ultimately saying is, if evil desires are not checked, if there's not systems put in place, or in terms of the individual, if there's not prayer and accountability in a church context, this is where your evil desires can take you. They can take you to killing. And this from a man who wants the Nobel Peace Prize. The man who's gone into Venezuela and kidnapped the admittedly brutal dictator down there.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, of course, he's
terrifying.
now said he doesn't care about peace because he hasn't been given... Well, why should I care about peace anymore when I haven't been given the Nobel Peace Prize?
I mean, yes, that's right. And releasing of text messages of exchange with other leaders, including the most bizarre one to the Prime Minister of Norway.
Yeah. It's a very different way of doing diplomacy.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right to suggest that the world has changed here.
Yeah.
I think... President Trump has changed it. And the thing which is going to be fascinating for me will be when it is no longer Trump's turn to be president, who will the Republicans go for next? Will they go for someone who is like a mini version of Trump?
Yes.
Or will America kind of go back to normal?
Yes. And, I think that there is surely a world that we would all want to live in, where the melting ice cap, the opening up of new sea routes, the increased threat from Russian submarines and spying apparatus, and the same from China, where America, and working with NATO and its allies, could come to arrangements and deals in a much calmer, more measured way that would allow for the defense of America in a way that satisfies the administration's requirements, but that doesn't compromise the national integrity of another sovereign territory.
Well, that's precisely the point, isn't it? And hopefully we will get there.
Yes.
But I was reading something today which I thought was bang on, really. Sort of discussing, well, for decades, we and our allies have sort of shared intelligence.
Yes.
Such as in the Arctic.
Yes.
You potentially lose all of that.
Yes.
If you break those alliances.
Yes, that's
and
right.
you probably make it less safe for yourself and for the world.
Yes.
By going it alone.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And I mean, the other thing I was reflecting on was, okay, what's a biblical example of a ruler, looking to take what doesn't belong to him. And initially I kind of was wondering about Pharaoh in the Old Testament. You know, people of Israel, he didn't like them, but he didn't want to let them go because they were free slave labor. But I thought actually a more pertinent example, and this just shows you how terrible this whole Trump business is actually King Ahab and Naboth's vineyard.
Yeah.
Because he goes into an absolute foul mood, like a child. He's lying on his bed, moping. And his wicked wife Jezebel's like, what are you doing? You're the king of Israel. Get up your bed. I'll sort this. And then they send fake letters and fake news, and they use deception and so on. And eventually they kill Naboth to get the vineyard. And Ahab's, I've got the vineyard now. Isn't that great? And I thought, actually, that reminds me of President Trump. He's a child. He's a child trapped in a man's body, and yet he's got this awesome power, this awesome responsibility. And, you know, Ahab, there is not a single piece of biblical evidence that you can find really in his favor. Just from start to finish, he's one of the most disastrous rulers of all the Old Testament, surely right up there. And he exhibits patterns of behavior that are similar to what we see in President Trump. I find that terrifying.
Yeah. I wonder whether it's worth actually us kind of stepping back then from the politics of this and thinking about this from a Christian point of view. So I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and they sort of said something which I thought is actually quite an interesting thing for us to talk about, which is they said, well, I find it quite difficult to understand what God's doing, allowing someone like that to be in that kind of position.
Yes.
So I wonder whether it might be worth us having a little bit of discussion over why things like that happen.
And of course, you know, we start by saying, let's affirm the sovereignty of God.
Yeah.
The Bible is so consistent on this. You know, he's Daniel 2:21. God raises up rulers and he brings them down. So we say, well, you know, Trump is in power because that is within the sovereign will of God. We also remember Deuteronomy 29:29, the secret things belong to the Lord. We don't know all of the Lord's purposes in this. And so I think this is part of why we get frustrated, we get worked up, isn't it? We want to know more than we're allowed to know.
Yeah.
But knowing that God raises up rulers, God brings them down, actually should be a comfort, even if there's mystery there as well.
Yeah.
And so we have to say that Trump's authority is legitimate. It's a God-given authority.
As indeed the authority of any ruler is, right?
Yeah. And I think what we also need to do from a kind of Christian perspective is say, well, you know, God is able in his mighty providence to overrule the wrong motives of Trump.
Yeah.
And to use wrong motives to accomplish a good end.
Yeah.
If the outcome of this is greater security in the Arctic and stronger rebuttals to Russian interference, to Chinese interference, then I would say that is a good example of the Lord bringing good out of this messy situation.
Completely. I think the other thing, one of the other things I would add would be, this is not going to be the first time that people have asked this kind of question, right?
No.
Like, there are Christians in all kinds of regimes around the world who are probably wondering, why has God allowed this person to be in charge of my nation?
Yes.
Or if you were to go back through human history,
Yes.
What do you think Christians in Germany in the 1930s would have been feeling? If we were to go back to the time the New Testament is written, well, the early Christians are growing up under the likes of Nero or the likes of Domitian, who are persecuting Christians.
Yes.
So it's not the first kind of time that this has been asked. It's a pretty common thing. And I really like what you said there about how it's not always easy to understand God's purposes, and perhaps we shouldn't always even try to this side of the veil. One of my favourite Old Testament prophets is Habakkuk.
Yes.
Where
he's one of mine as well.
Where Habakkuk is sort of, where he can see all the wickedness and the violence which is going on in Judah. And you've got to assume that the leaders of Judah are people who he has in mind at this. And he's asking God, well, why don't you do something about this?
Yes.
And then so God says, okay, I'm going to overthrow it and Babylon can take over.
Yes.
And then Habakkuk is sort of like, well, I didn't want you to do that.
Yes.
That's even worse.
He's got that wonderful bit where he says, you know, I know that your eyes are too pure to look on evil.
Yeah. ...
So what are you doing?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So it's not always easy to know what's going on.
But your Habakkuk reference is also helpful, I think, in a further way, which is where Habakkuk then goes, where the Lord takes him.
Yeah.
Because in chapter 2, the Lord says, you know, it talks about the importance of living by faith, but he also says, all of this is going to happen, but my plan still stands. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as waters cover the sea. And where Habakkuk, I think, ends up is basically what you're describing, which is he ends up in a place of going, even if the blossom trees fail to bud and everything goes to pot, I still rejoice.
Yeah.
I think, wow, do you know that? So I guess the challenge for the likes of you and me, Peter, is if that can be true for Habakkuk, and if that can be true for Christians in Greenland, Christians in Iran, Christians in North Korea even, then how much more true should it be for us that we rest in the purposeful sovereignty of God when we're in a nation at peace? But you made a really interesting comment in the car on the way down where you said, we've grown accustomed to peace.
Completely.
And we need to prepare ourselves, don't we, for those days of peace may end in our lifetime.
I think that feels far more plausible now than it has done at any point in the last 30 years, realistically. We're talking about some of the big superpowers of the Cold War kind of becoming those two big powers again, plus you add China into the mix.
Absolutely.
The world absolutely feels less safe. One thing which is really helpful to come back to whenever you're looking at anyone who is effectively either self-promoting or trying to take more and more power for themselves, as we're seeing with some world leaders today, is where power truly resides. So I was doing a bit of reflecting a couple of weeks ago, and I came across this bit in Psalm 33, which I think is really, really helpful. And it's in a passage which is going to be talking about the nations, and sort of, I guess, within this context, that is likely to sort of be the empires of the ancient world, isn't it? So if you think of the likes of an Assyria or Babylon or whatever. And the psalmist initially is talking about who God is and what he's done in the past. So he talks about creation. He says, by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, their starry host by the breath of his mouth. He gathers the waters of the sea into jars. He puts the deep into storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the people of the world revere him. For he spoke and it came to be. He commanded and it stood firm. And I think that's a really helpful starting point. That actually the seas, which seem so mighty, they just go into a little water jar for God. And then he goes on in verses 10 and 11. The Lord foils the plans of the nations. He thwarts the purposes of the peoples. But the plans of the Lord stand firm forever. The purposes of his heart through all generations.
And that is the consistent testimony of Scripture. I mean, arguably Revelation is a lot to say about this, which is that you have this great battle between the serpent and between the Lord, and yet it's the Lord who wins. And I was also thinking, as you were speaking there, that it's also an opportunity for us to reflect on whenever you come across egotistical, mafia, don-like leaders who I think abuse their power in many ways. We're reminded we're so privileged to follow a leader who is the head of the church, the king of the world, the king of kings, who's so different. And we've got this children's book for my daughter called The Topsy-Turvy King. And I've probably read this book about 1,000 times, maybe more. I can pretty much do it off by heart. But actually what it teaches is, after his resurrection, my kingdom is upside down. The dying servant is the one who wears the crown. And there's this wonderful bit where, his friends were all, one day his friends were all having a fight and Jesus says, no way, the big must be the small. And the foot washing incident. And all of this is teaching us that Jesus shows us what true leadership really looks like. And the Bible is always calling us to, that's who our ultimate allegiance is to. It's not to Trump. If you're an American Christian, it's not to Trump. It is to Jesus. And thank goodness the two are not the same.
No, that's absolutely true, I think. I remember writing, it's always tricky when we have to write our Friday long reads on Trump, isn't it? Because we also know that people do have a range of views on him.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before in the podcast, like there are things that he has said and there are things that he has done that we would agree with.
But I remember writing one time about how he wants to see himself as Jesus, and actually he comes across more like Herod. Trying to preserve and cling on to power at any cost. Which is sort of how it came across with the Capitol riots and things like that. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this story?
Well, I
before
mean,
we
I
move
think
on?
it's a story that we will come back to. I think,
Yeah.
We were wait to see what the actual facts about this deal that has been struck that apparently, according to Trump, will last forever. Well, I mean, we know that's not true.
Well, yeah. I mean, but it's so fascinating, isn't it, the way he speaks?
Yes.
Because that is the way human leaders speak and has historically have spoken. Like, if you were to go back to the ancient world,
Yes.
you will absolutely find the inscriptions of kings who will say that. And we know that that is not true.
No.
It's like that bit Isaiah, isn't it? It was
Yes.
sort of the grass withers and fades, but the word of the Lord will stand forever.
Yes. I mean, I've just exactly. I think that's Isaiah 55, isn't it? So there's this. I've just got this reference down. Let's hope it's an accurate one.
Go on.
But it's Isaiah, just because you mentioned Isaiah 31. Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. So this is actually, it's a woe pronounced on the people of God for their failure to trust in Him, and instead, I mean, I think I preached this actually. Instead, who is the great old enemy, the ancient enemy of the people of God in the Old Testament? It's Egypt, because they were the ones who held the people in captivity.
Yeah.
And what does Judah do when the Assyrians are coming?
Yeah.
Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, like reversing the Exodus. Woe to those who rely on horses, who trust in the multitude of their chariots and in the great strength of their horsemen, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord. And actually, I think there's a warning for us not to trust in the power of human leaders. But actually, these words could equally be said to Trump to say, you are trusting in the might of American military. And this is a warning to say, woe to you who do not look to the Lord and instead trust in all these earthly things that you've got. And I think that is sobering, because I think we could rely on American military might by thinking, well, ultimately we'll be all right because we're in a special relationship, and if anything happened, America would sort it out because they've got the nukes and they'd sort it. And you think, well, that could end.
Yeah.
Woe to us if we look to the might of American military.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my final.
No, I think that is also helpful. And just because things have been one way for as long as we can remember, that does not mean that they will always be like that.
No, that's true.
And I guess the story of the Old Testament shows, doesn't it, how you have one empire after another.
And where are they now?
Oh, exactly. You go from Assyria to Babylon to Persia,
yeah.
Greece, Rome. And they have all fallen.
The British Empire. Where is it now? Do you know what Tony Blair said after Hong Kong got its independence?
Go on, what did he say?
He said apparently to Alistair Campbell in a great kind of, and his principal private secretary, he said, we must give up no more territory. Britain's too small. Which is absolutely hilarious, because that's again the kind of thing that dictators say. But I'll just leave that thought there.
But yeah, I mean, just as the British Empire has fallen, so the kind of American hegemony will fall.
Yes.
None of these things are going to last forever.
And talk about things that don't last forever. I know of a politician whose relationship with his party has changed forever as well. What a segue.
Oh, James Transition Mildred, he's back for 2026.
He's back, and 2026 has started bigger and better than ever. So we thought it would be worth just reflecting together briefly on Robert Jenrick, 44-year-old MP for Newark, now for Reform.
Yeah.
He was elected in the 2014 by-election. He's had ministerial posts in the Treasury, in the Housing Department, also in the Health Department, and he was brought into the Cabinet as a Minister of State for Immigration under Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
But in the 6th of December 2023, he resigned.
And we, of course, walked past him on the day he resigned. We were on our way out for lunch.
Yeah, that's right. We did, didn't we? And he was having his photo taken.
Yeah.
This was before he went on the weight loss jab.
Yes.
Because his image transformed then suddenly.
Indeed.
And he ran for leader of the Tory party after Rishi Sunak resigned after the election defeat of 2024. But he came second to Kemi Badenoch. Is it Badenoch or Badenoch? Because this has been a big thing recently. He's been saying her name deliberately wrong, apparently. And he was challenged over this on Times Radio.
I saw that he was challenged, and I didn't bother listening to what.
So anyway, I've said both to cover myself. But Kemi, if you're listening to this, and I'm sure you do, I want to say your name correctly. So he's joined Reform.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a big surprise.
No, it's not any surprise at all.
What were your thoughts? What's your reflection?
Oh gosh, I think you've made the point there. It really was not a surprise.
No.
One hesitates to say that we can ever kind of fully understand what is going on in someone's heart, because we know that only God knows someone's heart.
Yes.
However, having said that, I'm about to do just that. No, not really. But With Robert Jenrick, there has always been a very strong suspicion that he has been out for himself, and that was why he resigned as immigration minister, when previously he had been seen as someone who was relatively soft on immigration, and that was his big move.
Yes.
When he lost the leadership contest to Kemi, there were strong rumours that he was going to be defecting at some point, or that he was going to try and oust Kemi.
Yes.
And the big moment was sort of seen as September last year at the Conservative Party conference.
Yes.
And Jenrick didn't get the sort of big profile that he was expecting. And Kemi also performed far better than everyone was expecting her to perform at a time when she had been under quite a bit of pressure.
Yes.
And so, whereas it had looked like Jenrick was potentially a Tory leader in waiting, suddenly his moment has passed.
Yes.
And it looks like Kemi's then going to be secure for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And then, because there has always been the suspicion that he's out for himself, people were thinking, well, he's going to defect, isn't he? And it was then no surprise that the story broke that Kemi had found irrefutable evidence. What I think is quite funny from a Conservative point of view is obviously when Jenrick was going to potentially do a proper defection, he holds the cards in a negotiation with Farage, doesn't he, to some extent? Whereas if Kemi says, actually, you're kicked out of the Conservative Party, he loses any kind of bargaining power, doesn't he? Because he's got nowhere to go.
Yeah, that's true. So we wait to see what position Nigel Farage will give him in the Reform empire.
Well, yeah, and the talk had always been that he wanted to be Chancellor.
Yes.
Anyway, I mean, it's a fascinating thing to think about. Let's think about defections and when they are justified or not.
Yeah, well, that's it. So here's a question for you from a Christian perspective.
Go on.
So obviously, a committed Christian, Danny Kruger, left the Conservative Party and joined Reform. Now, Danny's never run for leader, and he did so outlining a kind of philosophical, political reasons for doing so. Robert Jenrick spoke to Danny Kruger before he jumped, and one of the things Danny allegedly told him was, you get to a point with a defection where you need to put love of country over love of party.
Which is a good principle.
Now, when Danny defects, I didn't sense within the Christian world there was that much of an outcry of this is an evidence of an unfaithful kind of thing. And so, can we say that from a Christian perspective, there isn't actually anything wrong with defecting, provided that as far as we can judge and discern, your motives are pure and good? Because, 1 Corinthians 4:2, now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. Now, would you say that Danny Kruger has proved unfaithful in jumping the way he has? If he'd held a by-election to give the voters the opportunity to pass their verdict on what he had done, would that be more faithful?
I guess conventionally, very few people do call by-elections.
But I think that's a mistake. I do think that if you're going to defect, which you're perfectly entitled to do, I don't have a Christian objection to that. What I do have a problem with is I do think it makes a bit of a mockery of democracy if we don't then have a by-election. And you put it all. It's a big risk, isn't it? Because you could very well lose your seat.
I think the question is a very good one. I mean, what is the difference between Danny
Kruger and Jenrick
and Jenrick? I guess the Bible potentially views changing course through a lens of it really matters on what your heart was. So if you think of times when some people have rebelled against leadership, which is obviously different to a political defection, but have sort of spoken out against those who were in charge. Think of someone like Nathan, who confronts David. You are the man. After he arranges for Uriah to be murdered and he sleeps with Bathsheba. And that is done because it is a good thing to do. And so there's nothing wrong with Nathan opposing David. Or think of Daniel, who refuses to stop praying in Babylon. But there's nothing innately wrong with disagreeing with your leader if it is done out of principle, and particularly if you are seeking to be faithful to God's call.
Yeah.
Equally, there are other examples where that doesn't happen. So I think it's in 2 Timothy.
Yes.
And Paul talks about Demas, who has deserted him. And he said, he deserted me because he loved this present world.
Yes, that's right.
And so motivation does matter, I think.
And of course, that's what makes it so difficult as Christians. Because I think there's a tendency to go, Danny's a fellow Christian. His motives must be pure. Robert Jenrick, as far as we know, is not a card-carrying evangelical Christian. Therefore, his motives probably are more malicious.
And obviously it's not as simple as that. But I think with Danny would have a reputation beyond just Christian circles as a thinker.
Yes.
And I think probably as a pretty principled guy. And you can see that on something
What about Jenrick? What's his... Sorry.
You can see with Danny, for instance, when he's led the assisted suicide campaign.
Yes.
Someone I know worked for Danny for a number of years.
Yes.
And they said the Danny who they met on their very first day working for him was exactly the same person as the person they knew on their final day working for him years later.
Yes.
So I think he is someone who does genuinely operate out of principle.
Yes.
But what about Jenrick? Well, as I've said, it's difficult to know someone's heart, but that has not been Robert Jenrick's reputation.
No.
And so I think it's fair enough to be a little bit less charitable towards someone who has always come across like they're trying to be leader of a party and then they've just given up.
Do you think that... I mean, I was rewatching Blair and Brown, the New Labour Revolution documentary. And one of the things Tony Blair said is, he used to say to his people, it's not an ignoble ambition for Gordon to want to be Prime Minister. That's not a bad ambition. So as a Christian, ambition comes into this as well. When it comes to political power, is there such a thing as a ungodly political ambition? In terms of... So obviously, wanting power for the sake of power is ungodly.
Exactly.
But if I want to become Prime Minister because I believe that I can serve the nation, serve the people, and practice and exhibit the Christ-like servant-hearted leadership, I'm not saying Robert Jenrick is motivated by those things, but you know what I mean?
Again, it's a really interesting question. I think there is a difference.
Yes.
However, I would also say it's quite difficult to separate your own motivations in your own mind. In your own mind. So I might go into something saying, actually, I really want to be in a position of power because I think I really want to serve and I really want to do a good job. But it's really hard to separate that out from the sinful part of me, which just wants power, isn't it?
That's crucial. And that's why we should be slow to judge, quick to listen, because we're all mixed motive people. The remnants of the sinful nature stay within us. And I think... To me, it looks like Robert Jenrick has put himself over and above everything else. However, time will tell. And I also think there will be further problems for the reform movement that is a messianic movement and therefore is very much built around the personality. And Robert Jenrick says this. And so I think it will run into difficulties because any movement built around just one person, in this case Nigel Farage, if anything happens to Nigel Farage, and I've been preparing a sermon on James 4, to the merchants who are so confident of, next year we're going to go to this city for this amount of time, we're going to do this activity, we're going to make money. And James just goes, you don't even know what tomorrow's going to bring. And by the way, your life is a mist. It's a puff of smoke. And I kind of think that it's a good illustration. If all you've got to live for is this world, well then political power, doing what you can with it, that's everything. Whereas the Christian is someone like Danny, he knows that he's building and working towards a better world. I think that completely changes everything.
I mean, it's interesting when you were talking a moment ago about God being in power. The passage which just came into my mind was the one where James and John asked to be at Jesus' right hand.
Want to sit at your right hand. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. And Jesus sort of shows them, well, actually, that is not the way to think about things, is it? And actually, following me is going to be a way of suffering.
Yes. Pick up your cross.
And so I do completely get that as Christians, we want to be fruitful and we want to be shrewd and we want to have a positive impact on the world and to bring little pockets of the kingdom. I get all of that. But I also think as Christians, we should be more conscious of our sin and failing than anyone else should be, right? And so I think we have probably quite an ambivalent relationship with power. We shouldn't be quick to seek it.
And James says this, doesn't he? He says you should be slow to want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Because you'll be judged more severely.
Exactly.
But also I was thinking of what Paul says, I think in Romans possibly, where he says, have a sober judgment of yourself.
Yeah.
Don't be the person who overemphasizes your own abilities.
Yeah. And you look at times when, say, the church has had great power in history.
Yeah.
And some ways it has abused that.
It's ended really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not at all averse to looking to impact the world around us and to be fruitful, but let's be cautious, I think, and know yourself.
Definitely. And I think when it comes to knowing yourself, there is someone who in the last few weeks has definitely stepped out into the open.
This is a beautiful transition to witness.
Declared themselves independent from the family brand that they grew up under. So we thought we'd finish just by commenting on, maybe both of us just give a kind of quick reaction to the story of Brooklyn Beckham, who has put up a statement on Instagram where he is decisively broken with his family. He's confirmed the rumours that have been swirling for some time that there was a family rift. And he basically says he doesn't want to reconcile with his parents. And my reaction to this is,
go on.
Okay, God sets the solitary in families, but it's a sinful blooming world, and therefore even the very best of families can break down. I think it is desperately sad on just about every possible level. There will be a lot more that I am not aware of, that I do not know, but to see a son say and criticize his parents in this way is not honoring them. To hear about some of what he says and to think, well, there may be at least some truth in this, suggests to me that actually for the Beckham family, the brand is more important at times, despite their carefully cultivated image. In other words, I don't think that the Brooklyn Beckham breaking with the family is the first problem in that family.
I mean, I do ultimately agree with much of that take. I mean, certainly
that means you're going to court too, my friend.
I was very vague in what I said there.
Let me just re-clarify. Allegedly, Mr. Beckham has had multiple affairs.
Allegedly.
And I believe that there may be some credibility in these allegations. Does that satisfy you?
I think that's
just
probably
say allegedly
safer.
in front of everything. Does that mean you no longer can be taken to court for it?
Actually, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because I've not said it as a definitive truth. Media law means that I've basically covered myself by saying that it's not proven. It's alleged, it's not proven.
Well, it is undoubtedly alleged. Or alleged.
Yeah.
Alleged.
I mean, there was some pretty awful doctoring of headlines that went on in the Beckham documentary.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the whole stuff around Rebecca Lewis.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, my take on Rebecca.
Yes.
Oh gosh, certainly it is. It is incredibly sad. I think we all believe, don't we? Because this must surely be the case, that David and Victoria Beckham love their son. I can well believe that a couple who have well known the power of their brand for a long time have cultivated a very particular image of family life. I don't think that David Beckham is as squeaky clean as he likes to pretend that he is. You can't take me to court for that. I think reading what Brooklyn Beckham has written, and actually having seen little bits of it confirmed by, say, other people who were at the wedding, with the first dance where Victoria inappropriately danced with him.
I've heard mixed accounts on that.
I can well believe that much of this is true. Surely it must get to sort of last resort territory to kind of put out a statement like that, which is so incendiary and blows everything up. I think the bit which is a little bit sad to me, and as a Christian, I'm not quite sure what I make of this really, is where he sort of says, actually, I don't want to reconcile with my family. I don't really...
I can't agree with that.
As a Christian, reconciliation is so integral to the way we think. It just doesn't make any sense.
But also, I mean, it's one of the disasters of social media, because all of this is played out in public.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. I mean, family, the idea of family privacy is actually very, very important. It's there in the European Convention on Human Rights, that you have a right to privacy, you have a right to a family life. But they've chosen to so they've chosen to manipulate that for their own brand's benefit.
Completely, yeah.
But I still think, you don't need to fight fire with fire. You could have tried to reach out privately, tried not put this in public, done things behind the scenes. Just because they're doing it wrong, you've now gone to their level, basically. I have a bit of a problem with that.
You've got to assume, though, that there have been multiple attempts to have conversations privately first.
That's true. I think, there was this whole thing afterwards of which team are you on? Are you team Brooklyn or are you team... Honestly, I'm on neither team. I don't want to be on either team. I just think it's really, really sad when a family that has presented itself as so loving is so publicly now humiliated in that sense. And I think, I wonder what will happen next.
Yeah, and I guess the big thing in terms of reconciliation is to get there, you do need repentance.
Yes.
And you need... probably people on both sides, because these things are never normally just one way.
No.
To take accountability and say, actually, I'm really sorry, I got that wrong. Can you forgive me?
It was a reminder to me, I think, of how grateful we should be when if we've come from loving, stable families that have largely avoided this kind of fractious behaviour. We should be so thankful for that. It's a reminder in church to be compassionate towards those who come from very, very damaged families, because I can't even imagine what that must be like. And I think that's the power and the beauty of the church, and how hard we must work to cultivate. In Song of Solomon's, it talks about little foxes coming in to ruin your relationship, getting into the vineyards type thing. I was once told, work hard in your relationships in church to stop little foxes coming in. And I found that a really helpful image of like just a little thing that annoys you, that's unaddressed, you can then just get blown out of all proportion until you end up in a situation where you're needing to seek reconciliation. And so I think, no, you've got to work hard at your relationships. And I don't know everything that's gone on, and I probably never will. But if it gets to that point where you're saying, I'm going to shut all contact off, you have to think, some of the hard work perhaps wasn't done at the right points in the lead up to that. So very sad, but praise God for the family, his family that we're part of.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, we've said enough about everything. I mean, I've risked libel. I don't think the Beckhams are anything to worry about, frankly, Peter. I think more likely is that we get a mention on Truth Social by DGT, Donald John Trump. I think finally the Engage podcast is going to go to the stratosphere because Donald Trump's going to start tweeting us. That's actually one of my life goals. If I could get him to tweet aggressively at me, I'd love that. It'd be hilarious. So anyway, it's great to be back with you.
Likewise.
Thank you to Christchurch Haywood Heath for hosting us. Thank you to Isaac for setup. And thank you to you for watching, for listening, for engaging with the Engage podcast. We're thrilled to have you along with us on this journey. Don't forget, later this year, we'll be having a live recording of the Engage podcast. We cannot wait. And we really hope many of you will come and meet us. We'll be back soon with another podcast. Until then, my friends, goodbye. Peter, thank you, and goodbye.
Take care.